Blessings, everyone. My name is MT Soul, and I'm a spiritual seeker, storyteller, and guide on a journey to reclaim what has long been hidden, the divine feminine in all her precious forms. This channel is dedicated to deep reflections, intuitive insights, and soulful storytelling, offering a place to awaken the truths that live within us all. From exploring the sacred feminine in scripture to uncovering the spiritual significance of music and art and sharing personal experiences from my journey, this is a sanctuary for growth, healing, and sacred remembrance. If you've ever felt there's more to the story than what you've been told, if you've longed to reconnect with the nurturing, intuitive power within, or you're simply curious about the forgotten feminine, you've come to the right place. Subscribe, join the conversation, and let's walk this path together, reclaiming what was never truly lost. Welcome to Luna Soulchild. I just want to take the time to brush up on some spiritual housekeeping. Firstly, it's been about a month since I released my last video. During that time, I've been recovering from a cold and also moving through a very inward and hermit-like phase. And for those of you who have ever experienced being in hermit mode, you know it's not just about withdrawing. It's about deep reflections, it's initiatory, and it's healing. It's where a lot of the inner work quietly happens beneath the surface. And it's because of that inner work that I feel so strongly called to speak on today's topic, Inanna and the descent into the underworld. What's more, this timing couldn't be more aligned since we've just entered into the new astrological year with the spring equinox that we experienced just a few days ago. The spring equinox is a time of renewal, rebirth, and it's incredibly meaningful that this is the video I'm beginning with right at the edge of this new energetic chapter. So without further ado, let us begin our descent into the underworld with Inanna. There's something strange about the way healing sometimes reveals itself, not just in moments of clarity, but in the images our soul shows us when we least expect it. Recently, after the spring equinox, I had a dream. In it, I returned to a place in the waking world I had vowed never to step into again. My childhood home. The house was empty. There was no furniture, no voices, no one. Just a hollow shell of what it should have been. A home. And yet, it wasn't just a house. It was the physical manifestation of all the emotional and spiritual and psychological weight I had carried for years. A place marked by absence, no love, no understanding, no tenderness. In the dream, I walked through its halls. I looked into mirrors. I entered rooms I once called mine. But this time, I wasn't looking for anything. I was saying goodbye. I even felt a presence of a spirit in one of the rooms with me. A spirit I now understand to be the crystallized echo of everything I experienced there, the emotional residue that had taken shape and silently followed me long after I left. And as I stood there, honoring what it was, it disappeared. It faded. That moment was my descent into the underworld. And I say that with such reverence because while I've done healing work before, shadow work, inner child work, I never had a visual for what that journey truly looked like. Not until that dream. I had felt the work, but never truly seen it. This was different. This was sacred theater. My soul staged the perfect act to show me you've you've arrived at the threshold of release. And it made me think about Inanna. In the ancient Sumerian myth, the goddess Inanna descends into the underworld to meet her sister Ereshkigal. She passes through 7 gates, stripping herself of a garment or adornment at each one until she stands naked and vulnerable before her shadow self. She dies, she is hung on a hook, and it is only through a series of divine intercessions that she is eventually resurrected and allowed to return, reborn, transformed, and no longer the same. The myth of Inanna is not just a tale of descent, it is the sacred map of what it means to face the truth of what has shaped us, to confront the pain, the betrayal, the abandonment, to walk through the empty house of the self and sit with the echoes, to see the spirit of your suffering and not run but say, I'm not afraid anymore. My dream was my own descent. I wasn't passing through 7 gates. I was walking through 7 rooms of memory. I wasn't hanging on a hook, but I was facing the part of me that once felt lifeless, voiceless. I was guided not by ritual, but by grace. And in the same way, Inanna rose, stripped of illusion and reborn in her full power. I too left that house, lighter, clearer, knowing I had released something that had held me in silence for far too long. This is what shadow work looks like. Sometimes, not just writing prompts or rituals, but dreams that shake you, memories that revisit you so you can re enter them from a place of strength, so you can finally say goodbye. And maybe, just maybe, your goodbye becomes a gate, one that opens the path not only out of the underworld, but into your highest self. Every part of Inanna's descent is profound, but there is a moment in her story that truly resonated with me. Inanna set out for the underworld. Ninshibur, her faithful servant, went with her. Inanna spoke to her, saying, Ninshibur, my constant support, my Sokal, who gives me wise advice, my warrior, who fights by my side. I am descending to the Kur, to the underworld. If I do not return, set up a lament for me by the ruins. Beat the drum for me in the assembly places. Circle the houses of the gods. Tear at your eyes, at your mouth, at your thighs. Dress yourself in a single garment like a beggar. Go to Nippur, to the temple of Enlil. When you enter his holy shrine, cry out, O Father Enlil, do not let your daughter be put to death in the underworld. Do not let your bright silver be covered with the dust of the underworld. Do not let your precious lapis be broken into stone for the stoneworker. Do not let your fragrant boxwood be cut into wood for the woodworker. Do not let the holy priestess of heaven be put to death in the underworld. If Enlil will not help you, go to Ur, to the temple of Nana. If Nana will not help you, go to Eridu, to the temple of Enki. Weep before Father Enki. Father Enki, the god of wisdom, knows the food of life. He knows the water of life. He knows the secrets. Surely he will not let me die. When, after 3 days and 3 nights, Inanna had not returned, Ninshibur did as she was instructed. She entered the holy shrine of Father Enlil. She entered the holy shrine of Father Nana, and they both said the same thing. My daughter craved the great above. Inanna craved the great below. She who receives the May of the underworld does not return. She who goes to the dark city stays there. Father Enlil would not help. Father Nana would not help. So, Ninshibur went to Eridu and the temple of Enki. When she entered the holy shrine, she cried out the same statements that Inanna had instructed her to say. But Father Enki's reply was different from the others. He said, What has happened? What has my daughter done? Inanna, Queen of all the lands, Holy Priestess of Heaven, what has happened? I am troubled. I am grieved. There's something incredibly revealing about the order in which Inanna tells her servant, Ninshibur, to seek help during her descent into the underworld to see her sister Ereshkigal. First to Enlil, then to Nana, and only last to Enki. At first glance, it might seem strange. If she knew Enki would be the one to respond with compassion, why not go with him first? But myths are never just stories. They're sacred mirrors, and the sequence reflects an inner truth many of us encounter on the path of descent and spiritual transformation. And Lil and Nana symbolize what we often place our initial trust in: authority figures, structures, and even family ties. They represent logic, order, and emotional familiarity. When we fall into darkness, when we are stripped bare, these are often the first places we turn to for help. We expect those closest to us, those with power in our lives, to rescue us. And like Inanna, we are often met with silence. This is not cruelty, but initiation. Descent reveals who truly sees us. It breaks the illusion that love and care always come from where we expect it. It breaks our dependence on what is not truly sustaining. And in that breaking, a deeper truth is unearthed, one that can only emerge when we let go of everything else. Enki, the god of wisdom, water, and the subconscious, is the one who finally responds. He does not represent external authority or emotional familiarity, but the deep inner well of wisdom, the voice of the soul. And that voice can't be accessed immediately. It arises when we've descended fully, when we've died to the false selves we once clung to. Each god in the sequence represents something within all of us. Enlil is the rational mind, trying to preserve order. Nana is the emotional body that might withdraw in fear. And Enki is the sacred inner knowing that rises only after we've surrendered completely. This is the divine map of the descent into the underworld. Logic fails, emotional support wavers, and only in the depths does the soul respond. The myth reminds us that initiation is not meant to be an easy road. If Inanna had been rescued too soon, her transformation wouldn't be complete. Her silence, her death, her hanging on the hook, it was all a part of the alchemy. To ask the wrong people first, to be met with rejection or indifference, is not a failure. It's part of the right. It reveals where real salvation lies. And I've lived this myth in my own way. I too hoped that those closest to me would be the ones to hold my hand. through the darkness. I hoped they would see me, value me, be the light I never had. But they weren't, and the pain of that realization forced me into myself. To walk back into that house, to stand where so many of my emotional wounds were formed, took years of becoming. I had expected those around me to care, to protect, to love. But in truth, what I most longed for from others, I had to give to myself. That moment of walking the halls of my childhood home, of standing in the silence and saying goodbye, was not just closure, it was a reckoning, a realization that I had value all along, that I was never weak, that I didn't need to keep seeking proof of my worth from people who couldn't offer it. And it wasn't easy. Healing never is. But it taught me that I don't need to be rescued. I need to be seen by myself. And in that moment of saying goodbye, of letting go, I reclaimed something sacred. I forgave myself for ever believing that I was unworthy. I stopped looking outward and started looking within. So, yes, Inanna may have known Enki would respond, but she still asked for help in the order she did, because the myth had to unfold. The illusions had to be stripped, the heart had to break, and the soul had to rise. And maybe that's the deepest truth of all. Sometimes the silence we fear is not void, but a doorway. And when no one comes, it is not because we are abandoned, but because we are being led to the one who always will, the self. So after walking through that reflection and understanding the story of Inanna, the question is, why does the Queen of Heaven matter now? Why are so many of us feeling called to the goddesses, or to her especially? Those of us walking a spiritual path that doesn't quite fit into any one box. Inanna is more than just a goddess of Sumer. She represents the parts of us that are willing to descend, that are willing to strip away illusion and face the dark without fear. And in a world where we're so often told to avoid pain, to skip past grief, or to rush our healing, Inanna says, no, go deeper, go down, lose everything you thought you needed, then come back changed. This is what makes her so powerful. She reminds us that transformation isn't pretty, but it's holy and sacred. Her story offers us a map, a descent, a death, and a resurrection. It shows us that we do not return the same way we left. We return more whole, more honest, more sovereign. And this myth lives within each of us, whether we call it a dark night of the soul, shadow work, or healing generational wounds. Inanna teaches us that we can die and live again within the same lifetime. And that is a kind of magic no one can take from you. I'll quickly read an excerpt from Betty DeShong Meter's book, Inanna, Lady of Largest Heart. We can think of Inanna with her complex mix of characteristics as an attempt to bring together the seemingly chaotic forces of the universe into one unifying and therefore orienting personification. She's pointing to something profound. Inanna embodies paradox. This excerpt beautifully captures the essence of Inanna's spiritual and archetypal role. She is love and war, light and shadow. She is the wild complexity of being made whole. She is sexuality and sovereignty, death and rebirth. In a world and within a psyche where these forces can feel disjointed or overwhelming, Inanna integrates them. This line suggests that by looking to Inanna, ancient people, and we, the modern world today, could make sense of the cosmos and the self. Through her, the chaos becomes meaningful. Through her complexity, we find a kind of spiritual orientation, a center point in the storm. The concept of the underworld is an initiatory and transformational experience. And this is something that I already understood, but I think I'm just now beginning to fully grasp just how profound that is. Because the truth is, walking a spiritual path means being a lifelong student. Your perception, your opinions, even your understanding, they're not static, they're always evolving. And this is why I hold so closely to the phrase by Socrates that goes, "One thing I know is that I know nothing." So many people live as though learning ends after a certain point. They experience a few things, they build wisdom from it, and they assume that's the whole of it, that what they've lived is enough, and there's nothing more to seek. But wisdom doesn't work like that. To truly be wise is to know that you're constantly changing, and so is the truth you carry. You will always be learning, always uncovering new layers, always discovering different angles to something you thought you already understood. On this path of reclamation and healing, I now realize that I didn't fully understand what it meant to descend into your own underworld. Now I do. But even this is just one turning of the spiral. Because to live means to die. And you experience death various times in your lifetime. I think this is where many people get stuck. We've been taught to treat death as something taboo, as the ultimate ending. But death isn't the end to life. Death is the continuation of life. It is the necessary space for transformation. And that transformation, this dying and becoming, is not just metaphorical. It happens on every level: physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, astral, psychological, energetic. It's a sacred rhythm that echoes through all planes of existence. Death leads to rebirth. And how beautiful is it that we're having this conversation just after the spring equinox, a time of rebirth, renewal, and emergence. We've just passed through the death phase of the cycle. We've left the winter behind, and now we rise in the beginning of spring. The seasons are not separate from us, they are reflections of our inner world. If you want to understand your life, your emotional patterns, your soul's timing, look to nature. She reveals everything. So, if you've been hearing the call to Inanna, if her name has been whispering to you, or her symbols have been showing up for you in dreams and synchronicities, I want to share the books that have helped guide me on this path to deeply understanding her. The, the first one is The Magdalene Mysteries by Saren and Azra Bertrand. This book is like my sacred text. It ties together the rose lineage, divine feminine mysteries, and it draws parallels between Mary Magdalene and Inanna, and so many other goddesses and ascended masters in such a powerful way. If you're exploring priestesshood, divine feminine embodiment, sexual, spiritual wounds, this book is for you. You will not be disappointed, I assure you. The second is Inanna, Queen of Heaven and Earth by Diane Wolkstein and Samuel Noah Kramer. This book is foundational. It holds the original myths and hymns of Inanna, beautifully translated from Sumerian texts. This is where you read the actual descent story in her own voice. And lastly, Inanna, Lady of Largest Heart by Betty DeShong Meader. This book focuses on Enheduanna, the high priestess of Inanna, and the first known Arthur in human history. It's filled with poetry, spiritual depth that really reveals how Inanna was revered not just as a goddess, but as a personal, emotional presence in the lives of women. And it is from this book I am going to read an excerpt from one of the High Priestess Enheduanna's poems, Inin Sagura, Lady of Largest Heart. She, in the midst of havoc, shouting over the din, begins her sacred song. The song drawn with a stick carves her indelible sheen she sings. Her bread is lamentation, her milk is weeping, bread and milk of death. O Inanna, bread and milk of death, who eats it will not last. Who she feeds, burns with pain of gall, gags on dung. Her song sung with joy of heart, in the plain with joy of heart she sings, and soaks her mace in blood and gore, smashes heads, butchers prey, with eater axe and bloodied spear all day. These evil blades the warrior flings, pours blood on offerings. So who she feeds dines on death. This song she sings. What may sound like violence in Enheduanna's hymn is, in truth, profound metaphor. These fierce images speak to the death of the ego, the shattering of illusion, and the deep inner release that Inanna as a goddess of transformation demands. She does not merely heal with sweetness, she purifies through fire. To partake of Inanna's essence is to invite the dismantling of everything that is not real. Ego mask, false identities, outdated beliefs, inherited wounds, and unconscious patterns. Nothing untrue can stand in her presence, nor do you want it to. She is not the goddess who coddles. She is the one who strips us bare, who meets us at the gates of the underworld and says, "Are you ready to let it all go?" Her medicine is fierce, her love is pure. Those who come in contact with her, whether in dreams, visions, rituals, or initiatory experiences, often undergo a kind of inner death, a soul level shedding. It is the death of shadowy attachments, of limitation, of emotional entanglement with pain. It is not meant to harm, it is meant to liberate. Inanna is the goddess of holy destruction. She breaks us open so that we may be reborn into truth, power, and sovereignty. And in the ashes of what no longer serves, something holy rises. My descent is still unfolding. This journey didn't end with the dream I shared with you earlier. It continued even as I recorded this video for you all. While filming, I kept coughing and clearing my throat. At first, I thought maybe I was just really thirsty and needed water, but every time I would drink the water, it wouldn't cease. So I had to keep clearing my throat until I was able to speak again during the recording. It reminded me that my voice has been blocked ever since I had a severe cold in 2019. You see, I used to be in the church choir growing up, and I sang soprano. But after being sick, I could never access my upper range in the same way. It always felt like something had gotten stuck there. But as I sat there speaking about Inanna's descent and my very own, I realized it wasn't just a physical shift. That moment in 2019 happened before my spiritual awakening. And now I see it was also an energetic blockage. Years of not fully speaking up for myself, of holding back my truth out of fear, survival, or simply not knowing how to. Then came the technical issues. My iPad ran out of storage. My editing software wouldn't load. I switched devices out of frustration, trying to keep going. And it is while my videos were uploading, way after, I want to say, 1 to maybe 4 a.m. Mind you, I had work later that afternoon. I turned on the TV while I was waiting for the uploads, and the 1996 film Twister was on. And I watched it through and through, straight to the end. And it was the ending that particularly caught my attention. The characters, Bill and Joe, are outrunning a Category 5 tornado. And they get caught in the center of it. They end up taking shelter on a farm, in a shed, that quickly gets torn apart, piece by piece. And the only thing that they can hold on to, so as though they don't get dragged into the heart of the chaos, is this metal pipe that is bolted to the ground. And there's this moment that really spoke to me. It's when both of these characters are looking up into the heart of the storm with fear and uncertainty in their eyes. And then suddenly, the tornado dissipates. The storm ends, and they inevitably survive. That moment stayed with me. Because sometimes we don't escape the storm, we pass through it. We find ourselves at the center of the chaos, holding on for dear life, unsure if we'll make it out, but somehow we do. We emerge, torn, raw, changed, but alive, and maybe even freer than we've ever been. That scene reminded me of what descent truly is on this journey. Sometimes we're not meant to avoid the storm. We're meant to stand in the middle of it, to be stripped bare, to endure, because what feels like the end is often just the breaking open before transformation. That's what recording this video has revealed to me. For the last 5 years, I've been on a healing journey. And now, to speak my truth, to authentically express my soul, especially in connection to Inanna's myth and the medicine that it holds, feels like a full circle moment. The inner work is rising, and my throat chakra, my voice, my expression they're no longer silenced. If you are in your underworld right now, if you feel like you're descending, if you've been losing pieces of your identity, shedding relationships, facing truths you once avoided, you are not alone. You are in the myth. You are in the story. You are in the spiral of descent and return. You are not broken. You are becoming. So, I hope this video has been a gentle torchlight in the darkness. And if it did, I invite you to leave a comment below, share your dreams, your descents, your moments of goodbye. And if you'd like to go deeper into Inanna or the Magdalene mysteries, I am learning right beside you and will be uploading more videos similar to this one soon. So don't forget to subscribe and follow this journey however you feel called to. May your descent be sacred and your rising inevitable. Welcome to your rebirth.